Good evening, Deputy. Thanks very much for joining us on 6-1. To start off with this story about the undersea cables, do you accept that there is infrastructure off our coast that needs to be protected and that we don't have the capacity to do it ourselves?
Absolutely. They're two statements of fact, and I would contend, with all due respect to the Taoiseach, that the place that we need to start discussing that in the first instance is the Dáil Chamber and not Moldova, because the truth is that Leo Varadkar and the governments that he has been part of have overseen the systemic underinvestment in our own defence capabilities to such an extent that we can't even send our own naval vessels out to sea to monitor other vessels that we know are there, never mind actually being able to monitor what's happening in our skies and seas in a more covert manner.
Yeah, so the Commission on the Defence Forces identified what it called striking capability gaps in terms of lots of things, but in terms of protecting subsea communications cables, and it outlined a plan of action to deal with that. And if we are to do that on our own without cooperation with other partners, it's going to cost a lot of money.
Yes, and we need to invest in our defence capacity. And as somebody who values Irish neutrality and thinks that Irish neutrality has served us well and that it should underpin our foreign policy, then I believe that we do need to increase investment in our defence capacity. And that's not to say that we don't collaborate with others, but there's a difference between collaborating with others and becoming part of formal arrangements that undermine that neutrality and that perhaps actually leave us more susceptible to the threats that we're talking about.
OK, well, the government is talking about, the Commission laid out levels of ambition, as viewers will know, and the government is talking about moving to level of ambition too. But really, it probably need to be, if we were to do it on our own, we probably need to go to the higher level of ambition, €3 billion a year. It's a lot of money.
Well, nobody is actually advocating reaching that level. In some instances, that would require investment in multiple numbers of aircraft, fighter jets, a huge investment in terms of naval capacity in order to be able to prepare for offensive military operations. That's not what we're talking about from a Sinn Féin perspective.
That's what the Commission is talking about is a proper defensive capability, a credible enough military to deter aggression.
Well, what Sinn Féin want to see in the first instance is the ability for Irish Defence Forces to be able to monitor what's happening in our skies and seas, which would be much more in line with level of ambition too. Primary radar should have happened by now, and the real travesty of all of this is that the Commission on the Defence Forces actually published this report in February of last year. In summer of last year, government outlined an action plan that had urgent action points that still haven't been met a full year later. So there is a lack of urgency and a consistent lack of urgency, and all the while government are talking about advanced cooperation with other states, with other bodies, without having adequate debate in the Dáil, but without actually putting in place the building blocks in respect of the basic capabilities of our own defence forces. OK,
we're talking about a huge maritime area, even with the level of investment that you're suggesting, which is not the top level that the Commission outlined. On our own, we wouldn't be able to do this, would we? And
there is collaboration already in terms of subsea monitoring. That will continue and it may need to evolve over time. But there's a very distinct difference between collaborating with other states, which we obviously need to do, and become part of formal pacts. Because, as I say, if done incorrectly or done in a way that actually undermines our neutrality, it could have the converse consequence of actually leaving us more open to the types of threats that we're concerned about.
But we are members of Pesco, Permanent Structured Cooperation within the EU. We are members of Partnership for Peace. So both of those are vehicles for collaboration, as you say.
They are, and again, one of the
fundamental... Which is what the Taoiseach was talking about.
Well, one of the fundamental problems that we've had is that we've signed up to various missions. So Pesco is a series of missions. We're currently aligned with 5 of them. All 5 took place at the government behest with very little debate at a national level. And we think that that's the type of conversation that needs to happen, because the Irish people have shown time and time again that they value our neutrality. They see neutrality as a way in which Ireland can play a positive and constructive role in the world. We need to be sure that whatever one government does, it doesn't undermine the prospects of further governments being able to act in that constructive way internationally into the future.
But does Sinn Féin have a problem with cooperating with EU partners in Pesco on an issue like this, protecting this vital infrastructure?
Listen, there are ways, as I say, that we need to collaborate. We need to have a discussion in terms of how we can do that most effectively and in a way that doesn't undermine our neutrality. And what I have said, for example, is that in government, Sinn Féin won't withdraw from those missions that government have signed up for. But what we will do is use as a starting point all future decisions on the basis of how we can ensure that our neutrality is protected and that we can play a positive role. But crucial to all of this is that we actually have a defence forces here domestically that's fit for purpose, and that's something that has been undermined and that simply hasn't happened under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments.
Your manifesto in the last general election called for a withdrawal from Pesco, a withdrawal from Partnership for Peace. You've now changed that policy, is that right?
Well, what we've said is we've recognised in the first instance that when an Irish government signs up to an international arrangement, it's not just as simple as withdrawing from that without damaging our international reputation or without having the assurance that we have the capacity to carry out some of the work that those missions are currently doing. So in the first instance, what we have said is we will invest in our defence forces so that we can actually have the capacity to monitor what's happening in our skies and seas and to protect ourselves against some of those new threats such as cyber attacks. And then we will deal with future proposals from the starting point as to how we ensure that our neutrality is central to everything that we do.
OK, and very briefly, obviously there's a lot of talk as well about the triple lock, which is that any peacekeeping mission has to be approved by the government, by the Dáil and by the UN. The Tánaiste is saying that Russia has a veto in the UN and that Russia can't have a veto on Irish peacekeeping arrangements in the future. Do you agree with them? Well,
the triple lock was put in place, I think, by a Fianna Fáil government in response to legitimate citizens' concerns in relation to our neutrality. Without it at the moment, there is no lock at all. Essentially, what we would have is a situation where government could decide what we would be engaged in. So from a Sinn Féin perspective, the triple lock and the UN mandate is crucially important in order to ensure, as I say, that we have a very clear military neutral position that allows us to play that positive and constructive role in the world in terms of disarmament, in terms of peace building, in terms of conflict resolution and in terms of delivering humanitarian aid. That's what's given Ireland a unique and really positive reputation across the world, and that's worth protecting in my view.
OK, well, we will hear lots more about this in the near future. But Matt Carthy, Sinn Féin spokesperson on Foreign Affairs and Defence, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, David.